Go ahead. Hey, welcome. Welcome. Hey, Amy.
Hey, how is everybody doing today?
Good.
All right. Well, I'll kick this off if that's all right, Dave. Welcome everyone that is watching today for the webinar that is sponsored by SBA and the SBDC. We appreciate that very much. My name is Amy Kennedy. I am the Executive Director of the Buffalo Trace Area Development District in Maysville, Kentucky. And we do welcome you to this webinar for your Lunch and Learn today, and hopefully that you gain a lot of information from this discussion. We've been hosting and partnering in combination with 5 area development districts. So between the two, they're close to Grayson. And between the two, we are covering a lot of the area in northeast Kentucky. So we do welcome you, and I'm sure there's other folks across the state watching. We also hosted a webinar last week in partnership with SBA and SBDC last Thursday, I believe, that actually discussed at length some other opportunities. So if you want to go out and look at some of that information as well. But for those that aren't familiar with an area development district, there are 15 of those across the Commonwealth of Kentucky that covers all 120 counties of Kentucky. So we're here to help you and help our local units of government serve within the region. So we're glad to be here today. But one thing that a lot of folks may not know about the area development districts is that we also, besides the assistance with the local units of government, we also assist with small businesses as well through a lending program, which is called a revolving loan fund. And we actually supplement and complement other funding opportunities out there for businesses with local banks. We do not want to compete with local banks. We just do want to be that supplemental piece of the puzzle a lot of times for many people. So 11 of the 15 have those revolving loan funds. So I encourage you to look into the one that covers your area and contact them to see if they actually have or host such programs that can assist you. I know the PPP actually ran out of funds earlier and they've reopened today. So we do want to offer that other opportunity in case something would happen that someone's application was not approved or didn't go through the system before they would maybe run out of funds again. So we welcome you today. As I mentioned, we are partnering and appreciate the opportunity to be here with both the Small Business Administration and the Small Business Development Center. So at this time, I will turn it over to Dave and Michael, and they can get into a lot of the programs now that the PPP program has opened up again this morning. So thank you all for allowing us to participate, and let us know what we can help with.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
I'm just going to jump in a little bit and just talk a little bit about the Kentucky Small Business Development Center in case anyone out there isn't fully familiar with our program. But the Kentucky Small Business Development Center has been assisting Kentucky small business community for more than 35 years. And there are 13 service centers statewide to provide assistance in all 120 counties. All our services are free, and we have an experienced and knowledgeable staff that provide consulting, coaching, training services to help existing business owners and potential entrepreneurs succeed. Everything, again, is no cost, and we consult and coach in areas such as market research, opportunity assessments and feasibility studies, business plan development and execution, financial modeling and projections, and identifying capital to grow and start your business. If you like personal assistance, we'll show this at the end, but you can call 1-888-475-7232 or email at info@ksbdc.org or visit KentuckyBizHelp.com. So that's all about us. Michael, you there? You want to talk a little bit about the SBA? Maybe let everybody know what exactly the SBA is?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. The U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA, exists to help people start, grow, expand, and in this case, for most people, recover their businesses. So we do that in a number of ways, and probably what most people are most familiar with is our small business loan programs. Now we have several loan programs, everything from as small as $500 up to $5.5 million in terms of the loan size. We work with SBA authorized lenders, and there are, for some some programs, non-profit organizations that have been authorized by SBA to do these specialized types of loans. So that is important, and we'll talk mostly about the PPP program and a little bit about the EIDL loans, and I will explain what those are in a moment. One of the best things in association with us is our resource partners. You heard Dave talk about the Small Business Development Centers, or the SBDCs, and they are probably the most valuable asset you can have year in, year out for your business as you're starting, growing, and expanding. We also have a couple of other resource partners in the state, including SCORE and the Women's Business Center. We help businesses in normal times, and these are certainly not normal times, but as businesses grow, we help them with government contracts and exporting programs, and also advocacy events, things like Small Business Week, Small Business Saturday, and other programs to recognize and highlight the successes of small businesses. So that, in a nutshell, is what we do. We work closely with others like Amy and Sherry and their programs. And as Amy said at the beginning, we're there to help with businesses on the funding side in particular, not to compete with, but to augment what the lending network has all across the state and across the country.
Cool. Well, how about I put up some resources and let's talk about those, Mike.
Okay.
Oops, that's not good. So today, Mike, is the reopening of both the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan program. I'm assuming they all got launched at 10:30 this morning, like I heard. Any different information that you've heard?
Well, first off, the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, is what we refer to it, was launched at 10:30 this morning. That is the forgivable loan that people can use for payroll, and it's based on your prior history of payroll. If you have a history, even if you started in January of this year, 2020, that you can use the first 2 months of your history as a business for that program. Or if you're a seasonal business, you can use the seasonal types of activities you have in payroll. If you only have a 4 or 6 month season, you use that. But for most businesses, they're using what they had last year in the year 2019. You take that total amount, divide it by 12, that gives you a monthly average. And then you take that and multiply it by 2.5. It sounds a little complicated, but we've got tools that help you calculate that. So basically, you've got 2 months of payroll to work with, and it's a loan. You get it through a bank, a credit union, or a farm, a lending agency anywhere across the state of Kentucky, and you can work with those folks and be able to get tap into the funds. You use that for the months of May and June to bring people back on payroll. If they're currently furloughed, unpaid, on unemployment, you can bring them back on board. And long story short on that, as long as you have at the end of June, two things: the same head count, the same number of people at the end of June on your payroll that you had in early February of this year, the loan will be forgiven. As long as, this is point number 2, as long as at least 75% of all the dollars that you got in that loan through that lender go to payroll and payroll-related expenses. That can be pay, and that's salary and wages, including tips for those industries that where you might have tips as part of compensation, and also other payroll-related expenses, including taxes, state and local taxes. So you've got that to work with, and again, as long as 75 cents out of every dollar that you get in that loan is used towards that, then at the end of June, you'll that's when the program ends. You'll provide some additional documentation to your lender a month or 2 months later, and the loan's forgiven. Now, if you don't abide by that fully, for instance, say you have normally 10 employees is what you had, and you bring back 9, then it won't be 100% forgiven, but most of that loan will be. or if instead of 75% or more of the money going to payroll related expenses, say it's only 60%, then they'll prorate that, and you might have to pay a little bit back. But I think for most people, it's pretty straightforward and clear, and I think most people can use the program to their advantage, bring people back on board, even if you don't have them working. If you're in an industry that is not allowed to be open right now, even if you have people on unemployment and you bring them back on your payroll and pay them not to work, you can do that, and the loan will be forgiven. The whole idea is so that when you are ready and able to open up, that you have your staff there with you, the same staff that you had before. Again, if you have one or two people who don't come back, but you replace them with other folks who are able to work, that'll be okay. It's based on number of, the head count, number of people you have working for you, full and part-time, not on the actual list, the names of those people. That's what the bank or credit union or the other nonprofit organization working with you is going to look at. So that in a nutshell is the program. It launched again this morning. It relaunched, I should say. And they have about $310 billion to work with across the country. Just to give you a quick idea of where we were and where we are now. There was $349 billion that was authorized about 3.5 weeks ago. Businesses tapped into it, and in less than 2 weeks, those small businesses had used up every dollar in the program. So Congress had to authorize more money. Again, $310 billion that started today. It's a very simple two-page application. And what I talked about, the calculation for your average payroll for a year, or the existence of your business, if you don't even have a year's worth of history, you take that and then multiply that average monthly amount by 2.5, and that gives you a little wiggle room. It's 2 months plus a little extra, so that you've got enough to work with. And you can use the additional funds, anything above, beyond 75% for payroll, you can use for things like utilities or rent, or if you own a building, the business owns the building, say the mortgage on the business assets. So that's the Paycheck Protection Program. Just a couple things to give you an idea. In Kentucky, in that 2-week period, we did $4.15 billion in loans in 2 weeks. The average loan was about $174,000, and there were almost 24,000 of them just in our state. So it's a huge, huge impact in terms of getting people back to work, getting people back on payroll.
Hey, Mike, I got a question here. What if you are like a single member LLC or a 1099 contractor? How do you calculate what you are eligible for to borrow on the PPP?
That's a great question, and one that comes up often, Dave. On the PPP, if you're a single member LLC, you don't have any other employees, it's just you and you alone, then you would submit that for what your pay was last year, and you can pay for yourself. If you're a 1099 employee, then you need to apply yourself. I had a conversation with a gentleman last Friday. There were only 2 of them that were employees of the company, but he had about 24, 25, 1099 folks. So he wasn't aware of that fact until we had the conversation. He hadn't even applied for the PPP program. But anyway, he understood that the employees or the contractors who worked with him, but they were not employees. They had to apply on their own and can do that. And it's a simple process. And then he and his partner could apply as co-owners of the company. So that's how it works. It's based on the number of employees, full-time and part-time, but they have to be, by the IRS guidelines, they have to be an employee. If they're not, if they're contract labor or temporary workers, they need to go ahead and apply themselves so that they can get those funds.
Gotcha. Here's another question. So, if, for example, if it's an engineering firm that has employees that make, like $150,000 a year, can they can you borrow the full amount on their salaries? Is that how you would calculate that?
It will pay for anyone's salary, wages, and related benefits, related, expenses that go with the salaries and wages up to $100,000. So they can get up to that amount, but it will not pay for anything over and above $100,000. That's what Congress designated, and those are the guidelines.
So we mentioned forgiveness. What type of documentation is there? A standard set of documentation that borrowers should have when they reapply for, or when they apply for the forgiveness portion?
Yes, another good question for the PPP. What they'll need to do is provide some kind of documentation to the lender. Again, it could be a bank, a credit union, third-party nonprofit that does these types or is authorized to do these types of loans with SBA. And it typically would be either if they have a payroll service that has provided the documentation for, say, the year 2019, that is sufficient. Or if not, they can provide some information from their tax returns that show what salaries and wages were for the past year. That's typically what people will provide. You have to have something that they can't just take your word on it. You have to provide a document or documents that show what the salaries and wages were for your company over either the last 12 months through February 2020, or to make it simpler, most people have just taken the entire year of 2019, that 12-month period, and then take the average monthly amount from that. If, for instance, you have a real spike, say in January of 2020, you picked up a new contract or some new business and you brought some other people on board, you need to explain that so that the lender you're talking to understands that it could be a jump in pay, or conversely, if you had a drop in pay. So you're going to need to have a little explanation of that. And then also for those other expenses that are acceptable in this program, like utilities, rent, etc. Again, just sufficient documentation that shows what that was for the prior 12 months or the year 2019.
Yeah.
So, don't just put something on a piece of paper and give it to them. But you are ultimately, you as the borrower, you are responsible for that documentation. No hanky-panky, it's serious if you don't provide the accurate information. If you're not sure, if you're not 100% sure, we recommend that you talk with your whoever helps prepare your taxes. If you have a CPA, an accountant, or maybe even a bookkeeper, that's great. We understand a lot of small businesses do not. And that's where somebody else may be able to help you. Maybe you have a relative who does the book work for you. Or perhaps you can talk with the SBDC or somebody at SCORE or somebody else who can help you with that. But again, it's a very simple calculation. And as I was talking with Dave before we started here, I just found one brand new link that the U.S. Treasury put out this morning, to my knowledge, that shows about 8 pages of different examples of how to calculate it with different types of scenarios. So it could be useful and might be helpful for you if you're having a little bit of trouble.
Okay. Well, that's quite a bit on the Paycheck Protection Program. What else does the SBA have? Well,
the one that started initially back in mid March was called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. We call it EIDL, EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. But the EIDL loan is a program that's been around since SBA started in 1953. And it's been designed, and up until this point, to my knowledge, has only been used for natural disaster situations, Hurricane Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, earthquakes, wildfires, floods, drought, all those sorts of situations. The only other exception was 9/11. But even those scenarios, as big as those various disasters were, whether it was natural or man-caused, What none of them compare to the size and scope of this particular situation. So the EIDL program up until March 30th had just a simple application, and it changed literally overnight with what's called the CARES Act. And that was the Recovery Act that was passed on a weekend or a Friday late. And then Monday morning, that first, if you look at this slide, the first link up there shows how to apply for the EIDL loan, or a new component of that came with the CARES Act called EIDL Advance. The EIDL loan will give you working capital for up to 6 months, not in every situation, but multiple months of working capital based on your revenue that you had historically in your business minus your expenses you had historically in your business. So it's a simple application at the first link. It is simply, I believe, 4 pages in total. Most of it is just click this particular bubble, if it applies to you and your business, or fill in this text box. And it's very quick. You enter at the bottom of the second page, you enter the number of employees you have. At the bottom of the third, or the middle of the third page, you check a box that says, yes, I would be interested in getting an advance on this loan, or something to that effect. The EIDL is a loan. It's a disaster loan that is 3.5% interest fixed on that loan for the life of the loan, which goes up to 30 years. The EIDL Advance is a grant, $1,000 per employee, up to 10 employees, up to $10,000. So if you check the box on page 3 of the application, page 3 of the four pages, and then right below that, after you check that, it will ask you for the name of your bank account number, your checking account number, and routing number, so they can deposit that money into the account. Now, the EIDL, back late last Thursday, $315 billion were put into the PPP program, and an additional $60 billion were put into the EIDL program, EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. When they started about a month ago, they had $8 billion in the account, which was more than they'd put for any other disaster. And now they've increased that by 7.5 times. So those who have applied, and many listeners may have applied, and you may not have gotten your money, or maybe you got some of the advance, but you didn't get the actual loan yet. That money, they ran out of it very quickly. So what they are doing now is going back to those who have applied. They're in the queue based on the first website link. They went to that site and they submitted, and you've got an application or confirmation number that, if it begins with the number 3, the 10-digit number that begins with number 3, you're good to go. If it is a number that begins with 2, then you need to go back and reapply if you haven't already. One point I want to make, they have not turned the switch on with the EIDL Advance and the EIDL loans yet. That first link, if you go to it, it says that they are reauthorizing the funds. So you can't either apply or resubmit an earlier application just yet. They're trying to catch up, and I don't know exactly when it's going to be. Could just be a matter of a couple of days. I would recommend, if you need to go back and check on an application you submitted, at the bottom of the slide, there's a 1-800 number or an email address. If you have to submit because you didn't do that at all yet, then I would check at least once or twice a day until you can get in there. And as I said earlier, you'll be amazed how simple and quick it is to make that application, on behalf of your business.
Well, those are 2 programs. There's a couple other things that's available for this pandemic relief too, that's available through the SBA, right?
Yes, there are. One of them is debt relief, and then one of them is called an express bridge loan. If you go down to the third link here, where it says coronavirus relief, and you click onto that link, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. They list the EIDL and EIDL Advance. They list the PPP program. And then the third one is the Express Bridge Loan. That is a loan that you can get and get that money in a matter of literally a few days, in most cases, in your bank account. You have to work with an SBA. It's called an Express lender. An SBA Express lender is a lender who has a lot of experience with doing SBA loans, and they do the underwriting in-house, so they don't have to send all the paperwork up front to SBA for review and approval. There are a number of them across the state of Kentucky, across the country, many, many choices. If you can't find one who is an SBA Express lender in our state, you can send me an email and I will give you a list of them for Kentucky, or you can go on to the lender match link, a couple of links down, that will give you a list sorted by area, zip code, and you can easily find who those lenders are in your area. But they can get you that loan of up to $25,000 that can get deposited in your account in a matter of days. Now, that's not going to take care of most people, and we understand that, but it's just sort of a lifeline right now if you need money right now. It is a loan. It will not be forgivable, but you have an option there if you need some money, some working capital right now. The fourth option that Dave alluded to, it's called debt relief. On that page, the third link down, you'll see that. If you have any SBA loan whatsoever that you're paying on now, whether it's a regular SBA loan, and there are 3 different types of those, or it's an SBA, a previous SBA disaster loan, those are all in deferment. You do not have to make any payments, principal or interest, for, in most cases, 6 months. You do not have to pay that at all. So no payments required. You know, SBA is taking care of all of that. If you are continuing right now on an active SBA loan, regular or disaster loan from your lender, you need to contact them and ask them why they have continued to either take money out of your account or send you notifications that the payment is due. Principal and interest are both deferred for 6 months.
That's nice. So, Michael, what if I've applied for an SBA loan and been working on it through this whole pandemic shutdown, but the bank is going to close the loan and I'll have a new loan, let's just say in a week. Does this apply for that as well?
Yeah, that's a question I'm not 100% sure on, but I thought I read somewhere that anything that closes by a certain date, and I can't remember exactly when it is, whether it's in the end of this month or May, or maybe even in June, Dave, maybe you recall, but new loans also are eligible. I just don't recall what that cutoff date is, but I believe it is through the end of June. You may recall that. I can't right now.
Yeah, I guess really the message here is that SBA is still guaranteeing loans and banks are still lending money just on a regular basis. So the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL loan are not the only 2 games in town. So please contact your lender and see what else is out there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are 3 basic programs. The micro loans start at $500, and the largest loan goes to $5.5 million, as I said earlier. And folks like the SBDC are very well versed in SBA loans, as well as other types of loans. Loans like what Amy was talking about earlier with the area development districts, and other types of funding that is available sometimes on a localized or regional basis. Mm-hmm. But make sure you're looking at all of your options, whether it's an SBA loan or something else. If you need the cash, more than likely there are some various choices you can tap into right now.
Definitely. You want to talk about this last link here, Michael, this local assistance? What does that do?
Yeah, the local assistance is really important too. Like I mentioned earlier, the lender match right above that, when you click on that link, it asks again for your zip code. And when you type that in, it's going to list for you all the resource partners, all of those, including the SBDC, SCORE, Women's Business Center, our district office for Kentucky, or any other district office, and it will list some of our specialized lenders that do certain types of loan programs. So other than the regular, if you're more thinking about a commercial bank out there, these other types of lenders will also pop up on that. So it's based on what is closest to your zip code, and then literally goes out from there. So some situations, maybe you don't have somebody in your city or county, but it will list somebody close by, relatively close by. Maybe they're a 20-minute, 30-minute, 40-minute drive, but you've got options all across the state, all across the country. And if you just have a question, feel free to reach out to our office, because it will have the district office listed. Or, as I mentioned several times, you can reach out to some of our resource partners, because they're very, very knowledgeable about that as well.
Cool. I'm going to flip to the next slide here and just kind of talk a little bit about checking on SBA loan status on your loans, because if you've already applied, we get these questions multiple times a day. So on the Paycheck Protection Program, primarily your point of contact is your loan officer, and you should be in constant contact with that loan officer on the process, whether they need any more documents or anything. It's very important. Communication is key to success in this one. Wouldn't you think so, Michael?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, your loan officer, whoever that person is, they're driving the bus, and they should be able to give you an update if you submitted an application. Or if you submitted an application, got an SBA loan number, and are waiting to get funded, you should hear from them very soon. If you were told that you submitted your application to them, but you did not get a number, an SBA loan authorization number, ask them when they're going to submit your application. Dave, you probably have a few stories as well, but late last week I talked with some people who said when the funding ran out, they couldn't reach their contact for a few days, and then found that they were not going to accept new applications.
Right. Yeah, so it's very important. The other thing I would say is that there's still a lot of gray on this forgiveness application process going forward. There hasn't been a lot of guidance on that. So I think each bank will probably do the best they can with that, and probably come up with their own process, and probably, I'm just guessing here. So I would ask those questions too, what they would think they would expect to need in order that you would get your loan forgiven in the future. Have you gotten any other guidance on that yet, Michael?
Yes, that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up, because and this isn't an excuse. This is just what happened. Normally, when SBA comes out with a new loan program, they spend 6 months to a year developing the program, getting feedback from lenders, because lenders and experienced folks inside SBA, as they look through all this documentation, and it could be hundreds of pages for a loan, they're going to discover something that's contrary to what was maybe stated earlier, something where, as Dave said, there's a gray area or multiple gray areas, and they have to go back and get that feedback and tweak the program. And sometimes when you make a change, it has an unintended consequence somewhere else. So it normally is 6 months to a year to create something that they launched in 7 days. So there are some gray areas. SBA is writing all the clarification for the lenders, so they know exactly what they will need to do when the time comes, which will probably be in September or October of this year, maybe November. But your lender is who you will go back to and present the supporting documents after the fact to show that, let's just say you got $100,000 for payroll, and that you spent at least $75,000, 75% of that on pay, etc., and that you had $25,000 to spend and did spend it on rent and utilities. So you met all the guidelines. You had the same head count as earlier, in February of this year. So you check the boxes, and then the lender at that point, once they verify that everything you conform to, you met the guidelines, then they will get the clarification from SBA on how to get that loan forgiven. If you do not meet those guidelines, if, let's just say, you didn't hit 75% or higher on the pay side of the total loan, or there was something else that happened, you didn't have the same head count, wasn't even close, instead of the 20 employees you had, you only had 7 come back, you may not get all of it forgiven. And you will pay 1% on whatever is not forgiven on that loan, and you have 2 years to pay it back. So it's still a very low rate. You still have 2 years to pay it off. And, you know, the expectation is that most people won't have to pay a penny back. But if you do, you've got a low interest rate and a pretty good time frame in which to pay it.
Nice. The other thing we get a lot of question on is the economic injury disaster loan, or the EIDL loan. And again, a lot of the experience that we have, as Michael mentioned, is just anecdotal. We work with somebody and they apply, and they report back on what happened, and we all learn from that. I've had several clients that applied early on, and they were able to check their status on this this disaster loan website, but it basically was on the early website, the initial disaster loan website, which was very complicated and time consuming. So if you have if you had applied during the early days, then you should be able to apply here. And this was before the interim website where you uploaded documents. That process, you can check and see if you're in process there, and can see, and you would log in with your the account login password and login credentials that you use when you set up that account and made that first application. If you applied in later iterations after March 30th on the new iteration, there's no way to check on status online on that. And then, as Michael said, the 1-800 number is available. They can check on your status, as well as sending them an email on the disaster customer service at sba.gov. Anything you want to add on to that, Michael? Or that's kind of a frustration I know a lot of people have.
It is.
Know where they
Yeah,
are.
it has been very frustrating. And again, not an excuse, but an explanation. On the EIDL loans themselves, there were almost 39,000 loans just on the EIDL, and another 1,192,519 on the EIDL advance. That's the forgivable part of that. So collectively, you've got about 1.4 million loans that have gone through just on that portal, and they've got a lot more to go. But that was about $8 billion. So we've got another $60 billion to work with, and they will be soon turning that link back on so you can submit. And if not, I did hear, and Dave may confirm that he heard some too, of the people that I've had conversations with the last 2 weeks that weren't getting anything, weren't hearing anything. And then all of a sudden, over the last week or 10 days, the EIDL advance, the forgivable part, popped up into their account. Mm-hmm. And then maybe, in not as many cases, but some people have already gotten the EIDL loan as well, which is a much larger amount.
Yeah.
Now, if you have questions, the 1-800 number is busy, but a lot of times I've talked to people that said, yeah, they answered it in a few minutes. Now, some of them had an hour wait, but in some cases they cannot answer the question because they're just not able to get into the database. Some people are. But they are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week, and off-peak hours are a better time to try and reach them. Like any other call center, busiest time of the day is probably not the best time to call.
Yeah.
So if you can get off-peak hours, you may be able to have somebody can look into it a little bit more for you.
I'll just piggyback on that too, because when people get the advance funds into their bank account, there's no warning. It just shows up one day. There's no emails, there's no letters saying that it's coming. It just magically appears. And as far as I know, I'm kind of unclear on what happens after that. Hopefully that folks that have gotten the advance will hear something from the SBA about the balance of their application after that. At least there's progress, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they start contacting you, if they do have questions about your application for the loan, because that will entail some more questions. Again, it's a simple process. You provide them up front when you enter in your annual revenues and your for the last 12 months and your expenses for the last 12 months, just a high level number for both, as well as number of employees you have. That's pretty much all they're asking about the business initially. That doesn't mean that they won't have some questions, but they use this. You don't tell them, and I had somebody ask me this morning, said, where am I supposed to put in how much money I need, because I didn't see it anywhere. Well, you don't have to do that. They will calculate based on your revenue, your expenses. They will calculate, in essence, 6 months working capital, or up to 6 months of working capital that you may need. And that's what they base the loan on. So it's not always 6 months, but in many cases it can be that amount. And they will send it to you in installments. They won't send you the full amount up front. They'll send it to you, and a lot of people were getting their first installment. Before Congress reauthorized funds, they were getting a maximum of $15,000 until the money ran out. But that was the first installment of the loan. I heard of somebody who was approved for $350,000, and then they got another email shortly thereafter, same day, saying that they were getting $15,000, and they were upset because they thought they just reduced it by that much money, but that was only the first deposit into the account. So as Dave said, check your accounts, particularly the EIDL advance. You won't get a notice. It'll just show up one day in your account. So you can check a couple of times a day if you like. For the EIDL loan, you'll probably, can't guarantee it, but
Uh-oh. Michael, did we lose you?
where they can reach you just about any time during normal business hours if they do have some questions. You want to be accessible, because if not, they'll go on to the next application and have to pick up on you a little bit later. So if you're accessible by phone or at least by email and can respond more quickly, it's only going to help you.
All right. What else do we need to know about this, Michael? Any of the SBA programs?
Well, I think the main thing that people need to be aware of on the other SBA programs, the other loan programs, is there are really 3 different types, and it's kind of, I call it Goldilocks. One might be too big, one might be too small, one kind of fits just right. And our resource partners are very good at working with you if you need some assistance, and a lot of folks do, to figure out how much money they really need. Do they need as much money as they think? Is it less? Is it more? They're familiar with which lenders seem to be more apt to do these kinds of loans. They know their communities very well. As Dave said, there are 13 SBDC offices across the state of Kentucky. They work closely with other folks in the community, whether it be the ad district, the Chamber of Commerce, the county judge, the mayor, some folks that have regional organizations. They know them all. They work with them all. They get along well with them all. And their task, their number one task, is to help you as a business owner with what's best for your business. So they'll give you a lot of assistance, some guidance. They won't do all the work for you, but they'll coach you through the process. That's what they do best, is they coach you. And sometimes more money is not really what you need. You may have some other, business challenges. As Dave said early on, that they do a lot of coaching. They can help you with other resources. May not always be free. Maybe you need an accountant because you're not very good at the accounting side of it, and you don't send out invoices regularly for your business. So maybe your problem is not a cash flow issue. It's just you're not collecting on the receivables in a timely manner. Maybe it's another issue, an HR problem. Maybe there's some other things. Maybe it's technology or marketing. So a lot of times money just masks another issue. So those resource partners can really help you get to the bottom of it. But if it is money, if it is a loan, you'll have to get together a forecast of what you think you're going to need, a little proof as to why you need it, whether it's a small document or a full-size business plan. They'll guide you through that. And then it's kind of a proof that you need what you say, and that when you're borrowing money, you're going to have a way to pay it back, because nobody wins when you have a situation where you take on more debt and then you can't pay it, and it makes it a worse situation for you. So they're very good at helping you figure all of that out. And it's no cost. It's extremely high quality, very professional folks you'll run into across the state. We're very, very lucky in Kentucky to have so many good resource partners. And they're working for you. But it's like that employee who works for you, but you don't have to pay them. And they're able to help you through all of that. And a lot of times it produces really, really good results. So if you're not familiar with them, you probably need to learn who's in your area of the state and pick up the phone and establish a relationship with them. Another thing that Dave and others often say is don't wait until a crisis and then try and get to know a lender. That's not good timing, because in situations like this, almost all of them work with the people they've worked with in the past before they take on new accounts. Now, this is an exception like none we've ever seen, but I saw this in with the banking crisis in 2009 through 2011, and I saw it in 2001, 2002 with the 9/11 terrorist attacks. So the worst time to try and sit down and establish a relationship with a potential lender is when you need that money, and you need it in a desperate manner. That's often not, it's just poor timing. So as you work through all of this, just remember some of those lessons going forward.
Yep. So I'm gonna put up kind of coming towards the end of our time here, but I'm gonna put up my contact info. And down here at the bottom, you can also either ask for assistance at our website at LouisvilleSmallBusiness.com. We're here in Louisville, but again, we have centers all across the state, or KentuckyBizHelp.com. Or if you want to just set up a one-on-one meeting with any of our coaches here, you can reach out to our Coach Connect site at this link here. And then, Mike, you don't mind emailing with folks. You're at michael.ashcraft@sba.gov, right?
That's correct.
I should have put your information up here, but I didn't think about it. It's my bad.
No problem.
So.
Well, and I think, Dave, too, you all have our contact information across the state from last week's webinar. So if you all would gladly share that, we're happy to help in any way that we can across the state.
Right. I think that we had a pretty good discussion today.
Yeah, I agree. I covered a lot of the points that keep coming up over and over again with folks, and I'm so glad that Amy was able to join us, and I know Sherry's out there listening in too with 5Co Ad. So we appreciate you all getting the word out and being able to help folks. And this is recorded, so you all can share it with other folks.
Yep.
And I'm glad you brought that up, as I was talking earlier, Dave, about virtual meetings. It's, obviously right now it's not possible for most people to get together, but they're very accessible, for an online meeting or just a phone call, if that's what you need.
Right. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up here, unless anybody else. Amy, you want to take us out?
I can sure do that. So it's been a great pleasure. I hope that many of the businesses and individuals that have been listening to the discussion and the webinar have learned a lot, and best of luck to your applications. And just again, remember that we're there across the state to help as much as possible, and appreciate the partnership with SBA and the SBDC. So thanks for inviting us in.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you, Sherry, Dave, Janet. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.